The ego leads a lonely, precarious existence. However, when a human being enjoys compassion and becomes more at one with all of existence, then the ego tends to disappear. But the instant the ego can get us to cling to something, it is reasserted. It can say, "Here's the proof. See, I exist. I own this car. See, I exist. I have a right to fly in jets. See, I exist. I have got money. I exist. I think this thought. Therefore I am." The point is, the ego is a super genius at attaching us to things around us. It attaches us to ways of thinking and ways of acting. It attaches us to other people and other creatures. It can attach us to anything and everything. And when the ego attaches us to something, it does so with considerable force, and that uses a lot of energy. The ego even attaches us to life. In fact, it forms such incredibly strong bonds to life that those bonds frame most of our stories of how the universe works. Indeed, some of those bonds to life can be so powerful we can end up destroying the life we cling to. Yes, if there's one thing the ego is very good at, then it is attachment. So what is going on with the ego and its compulsion for attachment? Well, first, it is helpful to know that science informs us that the universe is the manifestation of an amazing, bounteous potential. Some call it energy. Energy exists in countless myriad transient forms. The universe is continually transforming. A form arises from other forms and passes into other forms. All is change. With self-consciousness, we discover human beings too are mortal. The form of human beings arise and pass just like all other forms. So here's the rub. With the glimmerings of self-awareness comes a sense of alienation from the universal potential, and the ego is born of this sensation of separateness, and though born of the division, the ego dreads mortality. It dreads the very notion that we are mortal beings within the universal flux. This is because the ego ceases to exist when a human being enjoys great vitality and a sense of being at one with all. Yes, we live a paradox. Self-consciousness involves a conscious awareness of being part of the universal transformation, and at the same time, this self-knowledge separates the individual from the universal. Remember, the essence of existence is continual transformation. The ego bonds us like crazy to life while resisting like crazy the acceptance of the mortal nature of all forms. How paradoxical. The acceptance of continual change is also extremely inconvenient for the ego for another reason. As we know, the ego constantly works like crazy to attach us to all manner of things. You name it, the ego will try to attach you to it. These, like all forms, arise and pass in the universal transformation we are part of. In brief, whether we like it or not, we are stewards of the forms that sustain us. The ego abhors such reminders of mortality and is strenuous in its denial of our role as stewards. Look at the extraordinary lengths the ego goes to deny the notion that valuable forms such as minerals, soils, trees and health-giving air are limited transient forms that we need to care for and to conserve. For instance, perhaps the ego's cleverest trick of all is to confuse energy with the forms that energy can be manifest in. This is the ultimate denial of stewardship and change. Here's a classic example. Note how many people now symbolize fossil fuel forms as energy. The ego achieves two grand denials of this. One, we use the fossil fuels as though they are as bounteous as energy. And two, we conveniently eliminate the atmosphere from the combustion equation. The ego is cleverer than the cleverest people. In fact, clever people are particularly vulnerable to the whims and dictates of the ego. There are reasons why this is so. Many even completely deny the conservation principle of energy. Of course, no such energy exists, and this is just a classic example of the ego denying our roles as stewards amidst the universal change. The ego is saying human beings are above and beyond the rules of physics. An alternative energy, a sustainable energy, a renewable energy exists that does not require us to conserve valuable forms. Indeed, the ego is so ingenious that some of our cleverest people come to believe that humans can conserve energy. And look how many of our cleverest people believe in carbon trading. This is pure ego speak. We know that human beings are part of a carbon flux. Carbon forms constantly arise and pass like all other forms. Our every action affects its flows and balances. We can never be neutral. It is this incredible ingenuity of the ego to persuade us to grab on, to attach, to cling to all manner of things that constantly creates our biggest problems. In fact, if left to its own resources, the ego can destroy civilization. Fortunately, a human being is much more than the ego. And if we can make an attachment, then we can break an attachment and release all that energy in the attachment for better uses. So stay tuned for the next episode when we tell you how.